Members, could I have your attention, please, for tonight's council meeting? And can I inform members, as you know, we do have a standing rule about filming or recording council meetings, and we have no strong objection to it whatsoever. Just to warn members that I understand we are being filmed tonight, and so if you do lose your tempers, please use it in words of one syllable and not four. Right? At least you are aware. Right. Can I ask our Padre to lead us in prayer, please?
Almighty God, we are first and foremost a thankful people. We give thanks for West Mercia Police, the Chief Constable, the Commissioner, and the men and women of our police service devoted to serving our community and to keeping the peace. We give thanks for all those who work in the service of others in the emergency services and in our hospitals and in so many other agencies. We give thanks for the young people of this borough and for the Youth Parliament, for those with us here tonight and for the part that they play in the life of our borough. We're thankful for the Telford and Wrekin Young People's Forum and for all the ways in which young people are involved in our day-to-day lives. And now, with the summer clearly behind us, this Borough Council meets tonight to review all of the work done since the last time of meeting. This meeting will bring with it a promise and expectation, news of all its plans and projects, and news of meetings of Cabinet and committees. Times are still hard. There's much to be done. Our councillors come together from many different places, from their busy lives and responsibilities, to meet and to focus on the community of this borough. And we're thankful as we pray for all the work of so many people that has gone into the preparation for this evening's meeting, for the working parties and committees and all those who've contributed to this agenda tonight. We ask again for your blessings on all those who are involved in striving to bring life to those who remain caught in the trap of food poverty and those suffering financial hardship. Lord God, we pray especially for those who, often through no fault of their own, find themselves homeless. We pray for those in our community suffering from drug abuse and addiction. And we thank you for all those who spend their time and their lives trying to make theirs better. And we say thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work for the honour of bearing community responsibilities. We pray and give thanks for our Mayor, for his work, and for all the council officers and for this assembled council. We ask that they will be granted continuing wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and righteousness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, personal peace in their own lives and joy in their task. Lastly, we pray for this agenda set before the council tonight. Meet with all who are here so that we may know the satisfaction of effective service and the peace that this brings. Help us all to resolve to use all of our time more effectively. And we ask that in all the debating and deliberating of this council, that at this time and at other times and in other places, you will grant continuing wisdom, courage, compassion, and peace. These things we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Right, members, I have apologies for absence for tonight from Councillor Ian and Veronica Fletcher. Are there any other apologies? Terry Kearney. Speaker. Jackie Lovage. Kevin Guy, did you say? Sorry, it's a strange name. And Martin Delay. Any further apologies? None. Thank you. Now, before we go into the full council meeting, we have had liaison with John Campion, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and Anthony Bangham, the Chief Constable, in relation to PCC priorities. And they are here to give an operational update on policing in the area. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Council, for giving us the time this evening. You will hear briefly an update on my priorities and then from the Chief Constable in relation to the operational side. We're going to speak very briefly and then move very quickly to allow you as members to have as much of the time as possible for questions. The three things I just wanted to touch on, Speaker. Firstly, hopefully all members would have seen the announcement that we've recently made that we will be increasing the police officer establishment by 100 officers that will take West Mercia over the 2,000 mark. I am able to do that by releasing a small amount of money further from reserves. I am able to do that because we've had some additional grant from government that we weren't expecting and some additional flexibility from government around how I precept locally. And lastly, because the force has overachieved some of its transformation work, so I'm able to reuse that money for other purposes. And my first priority is, of course, frontline officers. So those will the recruitment will start in earnest and hopefully will be in place early next year. The next was around civil parking enforcement. I was really pleased to see this week the Council launch its consultation around decriminalising on-street parking. I know that lots of your postbag will be full from your constituents who are worried about the impact of parking and the harm that it perceived to cause in their community. This is a really positive step, and I'm really proud of the campaigning from all sides of the chamber around this issue, and ultimately the council has finally gripped this issue, and with a bit of financial support from myself, willing to put it to the people. So let's fingers crossed for a positive support from the community, and hopefully this is an issue we can finally put to bed and give communities direct control back of parking enforcement in their communities, and they then can balance out the method to which they would like it enforced. Lastly, it was a plea from me around an offer that I'm making to all upper tier authority councillors around smart water. We know we are never going to police our way out of the issues that affect our community. And one of those issues are things like burglaries. And smart water is proven to be a very useful tool. It's manufactured here very locally. It is a useful tool to dramatically decrease the amount of people who are subject to burglary or indeed repeat burglary. Now, I offer all upper tier authority councillors, I will give a quarter of the funding. I will offer the signage and all the other support around getting it out there. I know over in sunny Newport, the town council is blazing the way to make their area a smart water zone. And I am willing to support big schemes or small schemes. So my challenge or my prompt to you is make sure if there are areas in your ward or in your division that need or indeed are worried about burglary, I can work with you to help solve them. It's a great way, street by street, engaging with your community, but more importantly, it's a really great way to help make burgling people's houses more difficult and then hopefully continue to drive down the threat that burglary is to our community. We'll hear very briefly from the Chief Constable and then we'll go on straight into your questions.
Thank you very much. Very good evening to you all. I will cover one of the issues, the same as John, around our officer numbers, but from a slightly different angle. So 2 years I've been the chief now, since 2016, and I've got 27 years of history in West Mercia. So it's interesting when you look back over the time of West Mercia to see how we have grown as an organisation and how we have shrunk as an organisation. And just to make the point, in 1998 we had just over 2,000 officers, about 2010. In 2008 we had 2,433, and this year, 2018, we have 1,930 officers. So of course I'm delighted that the Commissioner is now committing to ensure that we have 100 extra officers, but right now today we're policing with 1,930. A couple of years ago, I also committed to ensure we had stable leadership in Telford. I understand the importance of local partnership working with senior people, with you through the council, and I heard it loud and clear that we needed to make sure we left our leaders in place. And Superintendent Tom Harding has been in place throughout that time and is doing a great job in leading and working with yourselves. What I have seen over the last couple of years, at a time when we are very strained, is an increase in our demand. And this is undoubtedly the biggest issue that I am facing right now. The volume of overall incidents and calls is up. We have about 610,000 calls into West Mercia, resulting in about 310,000 incidents. We now have complex crime, which I know we've talked to you about before, serious and organised crime, child sexual exploitation, which I know you'll be debating later. 80% of our calls are around vulnerability and mental health, which require real commitment and long-term preventative measures. This is really, really tricky stuff. We have county lines, drugs interventions, which you will hear a lot about. We have human trafficking and modern slavery. These are things we just did not deal with just a couple of years ago. And of course, we have cybercrime. But amongst all of that, we have a continuation of the volume crime. Over the last 4 years, we've seen overall crime rise, we've seen burglaries rise, we've seen violent crime rise. So we've got a difficult situation with numbers down and crime up. We are committed to resolving this, and what is particularly pleasing in the last 12 months, and this is very much under the local leadership, working with yourselves, is even though we've got all that pressure, we've actually seen satisfaction rates go up. So the public are responding favourably to the local police officers, and that's a credit to them, but it's also a credit to yourselves. But the priorities right now is we have to do something different. We cannot sustain, even with the welcomed increase, we cannot sustain this pressure. We are just about keeping our head above water, but we cannot do the same thing. So we've got to have a look at how we police in Telford, how we police in neighbouring Shropshire. I have to look more widely how I police in the alliance with Warwickshire. And one of the things that we are doing this year, myself and John, is making sure that we put the local back into local policing, that we remove local policing from the alliance with Warwickshire and actually commit right back into the heart of our communities in West Mercia, because I don't want to have any distractions as to how we police on a larger scale. But we do need to look at reshaping. We have things coming over the horizon, which you will have heard a lot about, things like Brexit. I won't go into detail with that, but it's fair to say that we've got a contingency plan for all potential unknowns, and there is quite a commitment from policing both locally and nationally as to how we must prepare for all potential things that could happen. We hope that many of those will never be necessary, but of course you would expect as Chief that we will prepare our organisation for all potential situations. So I remain committed to a vision that I outlined 2 years ago, which is for a West Mercia that is strong, confident and compassionate, where the officers are properly connected to local people working with their local communities, and I remain completely committed to that. I'm very proud of what the officers are doing in Telford. They're working incredibly hard, but I do want you to hear loud and clear the difficulty that we currently have with increasing complexity, increasing volume, and a decrease in officers. We hope to mitigate that over the next year with an increase in officers, but I suspect that even with that, we will still face many of those challenges. So I welcome any questions on that, but hopefully that message is clear to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions, members?
Stun them into silence.
If I may, thank you. I'm sorry, John, this is around 101. There's still a lot of negativity around the usage of 101 and the contact that goes to it. I personally don't agree with that because it always works for me. However, what would you say to people who do tell me, or I read about it, that 101 is a waste of time. 101 cannot be depended on. How would you combat that, and can you give us any figures to suggest that 101 is actually successful?
Peter, I know that we've talked at length at previous times around 101. 101 is a really good idea of centralising the method to contact your policing, the non-emergency contact. But as we've just heard from Anthony, the demand rising on the service has meant that we are struggling to meet that rising demand. So whilst we have spent many years in telling people to ring us and indeed ring this particular number, we are no longer able to serve that at the level that we would want to do. So you've seen Anthony deliver something I think all of you should be proud of in terms of direct access to your local policing teams, the advertising of their mobile numbers and their direct email addresses, so that if somebody isn't able to ring 101 or doesn't have that confidence, and it is a non-urgent issue, they are able to talk directly to their teams, because the whole nature of non-emergency 101 is that it is non-emergency. And I know if I ring my bank and it's not an emergency because somebody's cloned my card and they're busy, I would ring back later or choose another channel. So my message to those that are saying that to you is, Peter, if it is a non-emergency, please do look at some of the other channels that are available. But if you have to ring, and that's your only method, we do answer all of the calls. Sometimes it takes a while, but we do answer all the calls, so do stay on the line if you have no other choice. Okay.
Councillor Miles Hoskins.
Mr Chief Constable and Mr Police Commissioner, a question about and regarding the force. Do you really both feel that you're doing enough with the usage of special constabulary?
I think we do very well actually with special constabulary, but I'm going to kind of agree with, I think, the essence of the question. We can always do more. And in fact, I had a very conversation with our control room earlier in the week because we had a whole list of unresourced incidents and we were really struggling to get on top of them. This is a lot around volume crime. And we weren't, in my opinion, effectively using the special constabulary and the enthusiasm of the volunteers to think differently. So we were just piling more pressure onto the regular officers and staff we've got. And I think we should expand that thinking to be much broader in taking advantage of the offer already from serving special constables, but also look to further recruit. And we always recruit and welcome new members. But I think I would agree that we probably should do more.
Councillor Arnold, England.
Right, good evening. I'm very pleased to see you here. I'm the Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing, and you may be aware that in Shropshire, and particularly Telford and Wrekin, there is a move to close our accident and emergency department and move all the services to Shrewsbury. I am told that that will have an adverse effect, or potential adverse effect on policing in Telford, because many officers will be tied up dealing with whatever at Shrewsbury Hospital, and that will denude resources from Telford. A, are you aware of all that? And B, do you have a plan if they do close our accident and emergency? And C, can you make any representation that the effect of policing will be deleterious to the residents of Telford?
The plan, I can't say with any certainty as to whether we've got a fixed plan and written down plan. I have no doubt the two local command teams, both from Telford and Shropshire, will have been working through that. But I think there's a more general point. We heard this morning on the news that councils are financially strained and many are looking at cutting back services. We know the health service is strained, we know the police service is strained. If we make decisions in isolation, and we have seen some decisions in the courts, for example, then the unintended consequences and the knock-on on operational time and policing, it's no good to the public that one service benefits and another doesn't. So if we haven't got a plan, and I would seriously hope we do, we should be talking at the most senior levels, we should be considering how we manage our estate better, we should be considering how we work better, and any health service decisions should be based on a very clear understanding as to policing impact as well as other agencies.
Nicola Lowry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. A question aside for our Commissioner. Commissioner, this month you announced that additional 100 police officers, as you rightly mentioned in your speech, will be hired in the force across Shropshire. Can you reassure this council and our residents that these officers will support frontline policing, as whilst I know a lot of our teams work incredibly hard locally, our residents certainly want more visible and proactive policing?
Yes, it is increasing our establishment, so the plans are being put in place now to recruit those extra 100 police constables.
And just for clarification, the Commissioner provides the funds available to me as Chief, and then I will, of course, decide where we put them. But the joint commitment from us both is that the need right now, as I've talked about the demand, is on our front line, and therefore the joint commitment is definitely to the front line.
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More of a statement than a question. I just want to share the concerns that you have with resources. I think, and I believe I can speak on behalf of everybody here, we've had excellent relationships with the police at senior level, and also as a ward member, my wife and I and others can say we've had extremely good relationships with the PCSOs at the local levels and with sergeants and inspectors at local stations. And I think the residents are probably aware of that because they see that visible image of somebody walking around. And it doesn't seem like high-level policing, but it's such a great prevention in the future. They can get the intel of what's going on in the ward, where the problems are. You don't need always computers to analyse and do all these things. It needs people. We're aware of the strictures that you're under. We're trying to fund more into adult social services as the demography grows. Obviously, we look at more resources going into this problems we've had recently with CSE and all aspects of policing. Our own children's social services will be under funding pressure because of the government cuts, which I know you've had to sustain yourself. And it's quite stark and shocking when you look at the realities of it. You nearly had 2,500 police officers in 2008. We're looking at just under 2,000 now. And it's the fact that you need that resource not just to solve the crimes, but to prevent them coming in the first place. And it's absolutely essential, just as much as we need that money to keep people and care for them at home before crises happen, to stop them going to hospital. And I think we feel that you should be resourced better as we should be resourced better. I'm not going to come up with political statements like we hope you're going to fight for the reduction in cuts, but we sympathise greatly with the reduction in resources that you've had. Thank you. Thank you.
Just to touch on resources and to be clear, in recent years we've seen an increase in the amount of money that we've got to spend year on year. I poured more money into the budget, so we are seeing our budgets grow, but we're also seeing the pressures on policing grow. So I don't anybody want to think that in the recent times we're talking about reductions. We are talking about increase. It's just not as far as we would want to go. But we also are going through a journey that I know you've gone through as an organisation as well, in terms of how you spend the money you have already. We're a £211 million organisation. We have much more to do in terms of the efficiency in the way that we spend that money, and neither Anthony nor I shy away from that, and I will support Anthony in that journey. I joined a service where the frontline officers didn't have access to smartphones or laptops. That has now changed. There are many other things that we are going through as an organisation that will help us make it more efficient, but what you're hearing clearly from both of us, we are recognising that that still isn't going to be enough to see that rising challenge that is being presented to us.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a question for the Chief Constable. Do you think that the victims of violent attack or armed robbery are sufficiently kept informed by the investigating officers as to the progress?
It's a very specific question. I would suspect there's probably some experience behind that. I think on the whole, as I said, our victim satisfaction rates have gone up, which when you look at the demands they face and the number of cases they're dealing with, I think that's commendable. But it still shows us that even at 80%, there's 20% of victims that are not getting the contact, not getting the service that they expect. And therefore, that's a very clear indication that we need to do better. And investigating officers want to provide the service, but they're coming on duty and they're starting with a catch-up and they've got a high caseload, and they are trying to keep on top of it. They're trying to do their best. They are prioritising in accordance with the threat and risk they deal with. They would love to do better, and I'd love them to do better. But I think the statistics prove we need to do better in that respect for our victims.
Thank you. Councillor Sahota.
Thank you. Just wait a minute. I'll be short. Sorry about that, Rob. My question is to the police commissioner. Given the fact that you have put in to take over the fire authority, and given the fact that all the local councils and the people, the town councils and the other parish councils are opposed to it, and the majority of the public, would you say you are a listening commissioner?
Firstly, Councillor Sahota, I'd say you were wrong. Because my consultation clearly showed that the communities across West Mercia, including here, supported the move, and indeed some upper-tier authorities and local councils did oppose it. But the fact remains, and we were talking earlier around efficiency, I do believe that the only way the fire service and the police service are going to meet the demands placed on them in the future is through better collaboration. Now, I know there are the green shoots of collaboration that are forcing their way out of the soil around the two fire authorities in West Mercia, but I would say to you it's not going far enough. We've got a £20 million organisation in Shropshire Fire that's governed by 3 people whose collective salary is £300,000. They are governed by 17 members still. They don't have any shared direct senior posts. I recognise we're not going to move to the perfect position straight away, but my commitment remains to it, and I recognise it causes consternation, not just on this side of this particular council, but on it's the only thing I've managed to unite this council over, I think. But I still believe in it because ultimately I think it gives a better chance of the organisation surviving to deliver the service that our communities need, because without it, I don't have the confidence that they will.
Yeah. Councillor Tim Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to both our speakers for coming to update us. I think this is a question for Mr. Chief Constable, who mentioned Brexit. Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin, I can't speak for the rest of West Mercia, were staunch Leave. So there's a fairly strong majority of people who certainly 2 years ago expected that we will be leaving the EU. I wonder if you could share with us the preparations you're making to prepare the force for that eventuality. Thank you.
Always knew it was dangerous to mention Brexit. So both from policing, and this has been led nationally as well as regionally and locally, but also through the Local Resilience Forum, and there are some people in the room who sit on that partnership. We are, from a police side, looking at the potential for civil disorder, for major disruption to the road network, and for just the potential for a disruption to supplies that could cause difficulties amongst vulnerable people and communities in general. Now, I am not in here in any way to give a view on that, other than the fact of it's a responsibility for me if I am being told that there could be civil disorder. If that's an assessment from somewhere, then I, of course, have to make sure that we keep the peace and we prepare our communities for that eventuality. I seriously hope that it doesn't come to the fore in any way. And Local Resilience Forum, that's much more looking at potential health, food, agricultural issues, and just all the things that you would expect us to plan for. That's nothing to do with being police. The fact I do chair the Local Resilience Forum as Chief Constable for West Mercia gives me that responsibility for that too. But we, at our next strategic meeting, will just be going through the kind of technical notices we've had from the Cabinet Office to say you need to be looking at these things locally as an indication of the things that Brexit might bring. Thank you.
That completes my list. Has any other member got a question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You'll be aware that there's been a 50% year-on-year increase in rural crime, certainly within Telford and Wrekin. And I'd be really interested, either Chief Constable or Commissioner, in hearing what solace or what degree of optimism you can give to those that I represent and also other residents within the rural area of the borough about measures that are in place to reduce that rural crime in year, and what strategic steps you have planned for future years. Thank you.
So I'll do the Commissioner side first, and then the Chief will touch on the more operational side. When I stood for election, it was part of my pitch, because I think the rural communities are often very resilient and get on with it, as it were. And part of my pitch is, well, we are the police service for everywhere, and we need to make sure we are supporting all communities. And I want to make sure they have confidence to report it, and that something will happen as a result. Otherwise, the police have no chance of catching the criminals who are causing it in the first place if we don't know about it. So we've done a few things. Firstly, we've got rural and business crime officers who are dedicated, working out there with some of these more remote communities. Second of all, we've invested in some of the we don't buy crime equivalent, the smart water equivalent that stops your burglaries, the equivalent out in our rural communities. And lastly, we've set some standards around the service that victim can expect, not only in recovery but also operationally, the standards that they can expect. Now, is it perfect? No. Has it improved? Yes. Has it improved enough? No, it hasn't. And part of the reasons why I've just conducted a recent parish council survey is about their understanding, because predominantly, not all of them are, because I know you have town councils yourselves, but predominantly they are the small rural parishes out there across our rural areas, and understanding their perception of it, for me, will be a good measure to know whether or not we are making the strides that we want to make.
From the operational side, you probably hit what I think is one of our biggest challenges in West Mercia. We police the borders, of course, with West Midlands, right through from Telford through to Redditch, and have all of the creep across the crime that I talked about, the threats that more urban metropolitan forces have, and we're very vulnerable to that in this area. And there's very significant threat and harm in those categories. But at the same time, we're predominantly a rural force, right through to some of the most sparsely populated rural areas in the country, to the Welsh borders and some of the mountains. To be able to police and prioritise both of those issues successfully is a daily challenge. I hope, as John has just outlined, that there remains a commitment. It's a very visible commitment. We've specialist officers. We work with local people who understand it better than we do, and we will always be committed to assisting rural communities. It needs to be preventative, not just reactive, but it is a big issue for us. And I can't promise that we will get it right all the time, because I know we won't, because frankly, we are generally, on most of those incidents, having to work out where the most important priority is for us to respond to. So we will never neglect, never forget, and never say we won't do it, but we do have that real challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions? No. Well, gentlemen, can I thank you for joining us tonight? We do appreciate you're busy people, and that to give time up to come and talk to us is appreciated. But thank you very much for coming, and we hope we shall be able to extend another invitation in a few months' time.
Thank you.
Members, will you show your appreciation? Right, members, we have confirmed the minutes of the previous council meeting. We move on now to item that is called 11 here, notices of motion. And for this first motion, we are joined by the members and delegates from the Youth Parliament, which we do welcome you here. It's to see democracy at work can either be enjoyable or downright boring. But one thing we can say that here in this authority, all members are active, not only here at council meetings, but active within their wards. And I'm going to ask Councillor Paul Watling to propose his motion. This will be seconded by Councillor Richard Overton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the privilege of allowing the young people to come and present this motion today. I reserve my right to speak on the motion and would like the young people to come up maybe and present their motion. This is a motion from the Member of Youth Parliament and Deputy Member of Youth Parliament and the Young People's Forum from Telford. They've asked for some time to speak to the motion, and I'd welcome that. And we can have the debate afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Seconded by Richard. Now do we ask them?
Good evening, everyone who's taken the time to listen to this motion. My name's Amar, I'm 15, and I'm the Member of Youth Parliament for Telford and the Wrekin. We're calling on the Council of Telford and Wrekin to endorse the Votes at 16 campaign. This would mean that 16 and 17-year-olds would have the right to vote in all elections. Currently, 1.5 million 16 and 17-year-olds are denied the vote. This policy is endorsed by Labour and Liberal Democrat, and also in some ways by the Conservatives. So the Labour Party now believes in extending democracy to all 16 and 17-year-olds, as was stated in the manifesto recently. The Lib Dems have long been supporters of this policy. So, and they believe, all MPs believe that this vote should go down to 16. A common misconception is that the Conservative Party don't back this. However, this is not at all true. The party does not openly state whether or not it backs it in the manifesto. However, a lot of individual politicians make their own decisions. These include senior backbencher Sir Peter Bottomley, two former education ministers, secretaries Justine Greening and Nicky Morgan, and even the former Chancellor of the Exchequer and editor of the London Evening Standard, Sir George Osborne. Telford and Wrekin should now follow other innovative councils to back this motion and shine our name out to the country as one of the leading councils committed to our young constituents. I'd now like to mention some of the arguments against 16 and 17-year-olds having the vote and why I don't believe that they're valid. Firstly, that we're not well enough informed or intelligent enough to vote. This is first of all the responsibility of our society to educate people in politics and life skills, an area which we believe that schools do not focus enough on. This therefore does not bring the burden upon young people, but instead on the people around them. And it asks this crucial question: why are we not properly educating our 16 and 17-year-olds as well as all of our young people? Furthermore, the word intelligence. Since when do we disenfranchise people based on their intelligence? Allowing comments like this to go unchallenged leads to a democracy where registering to vote includes an IQ test, and people are stripped of their rights based on knowledge. Another argument is as follows: young people simply aren't interested in politics. If a young person has no interest in politics, their surroundings are not properly stimulating them. We need to stimulate the minds of young people by introducing them to the political world from school age. Currently, young people are barred from politics, not to mention the fact that giving them the vote itself would increasingly engage them in the political system. Also, there is no evidence at all to back this desperate claim, and if anything, we can learn from the example of the Scottish referendum, which happened 4 years and 2 days ago, when 16 and 17-year-olds voted with a turnout of 75%. 75%. Now compare this to the next age band, where the statistic was just over 50%, and we can start to see what this is. 16 and 17-year-olds do care about politics. Young people are currently being denied their vote across the UK. This has to stop. The time is right now to enact change and leave our mark on the face of the world. I am urging every single councillor in this room to help spark the change and vote for what is right. We need to unite to engage, empower and enfranchise our young people aged 16 and 17 to our democracy. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have some fresh information on this important debate.
Thank you. That was confident.
Good evening. My name is Tom Rowe, and rather aptly, today is my 16th birthday. This day marks my ability to move out, pay tax if I work, drive a moped, or bring a child into this world through legal sex. In other words, this day marks in many ways me becoming a fully functioning member of society. Except I'm not. Except I cannot have my say about what my taxes could be going towards, or about the world my hypothetical child may also grow of age unheard in. That is without your help and other councils throughout the country. I want you to consider democracy. I don't think I need to explain its importance too much, as without it, none of us would be here today. But it is integral to have a government that reflects the people, can speak up for the people, and has the people in mind. Document as old as the Magna Carta 800 years ago talks about this idea of government, and clauses like no taxation without representation exist as a direct contradiction to the lives of too many young people, although the implicit contradictions run deeper. As Amar has already spoken about, 16 to 18-year-olds need a voice to broadcast the political literacy that they have the same access to as any other voter. Within a couple of minutes on Google, I can find out loads of information about everyone standing for election in my constituency. As I said, we need you today to think about democracy. 100 years ago this year, the historic motion was passed that caused the extension of democracy to include women, a previously unrepresented sector of society. A similar thing needs to happen again, to create a democracy that reflects the greatest number of citizens. Young people in this demographic are able to learn, able to shape a country, able to be the citizens that they are allowed to be in every other sense. We just need to allow them. You just need to allow them. Through the tireless campaigning of various organisations and the work of groups, even within the borough like the Young People's Forum, it's been proven time and time again that young people should be seen as just that, people. Members of society in the same way as you, able to affect society and be affected by society in the same way as you are. So let them be heard, let them have their say, let them vote. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Samantha Smith, and over the past 2 years, I've had the privilege to represent the voice of our young people as Youth MP and Deputy. I daren't repeat and rehash the compendious points addressed by my colleagues, otherwise I fear I may run the risk of making the three of us sound rather one note. Lord knows there's enough monotony in the British democratic system already. I shall instead endeavour to alert you to the prevalence of our constituency's ever-evolving unified voice and the impact it has on the demography of our area. In 1983, for example, the population of Telford and Wrekin comprised of just under 108,000, with the predominant populace being middle-aged, middle-class, 1864s. Compare that now to 2011, and Telford had ballooned to a population of 142,723, with 91.9% of those being Caucasian and 61.2% being of working age. Now, take a look at our local council, at the colleagues sat either side of you. Of the current Telford and Wrekin councillors, 70.4% are male, 94.4% are Caucasian, and not to my knowledge is a single councillor for the borough of Telford and Wrekin under the age of 25. To my knowledge.
You look older.
In what way is this relevant to the debate on the rights of 16-year-olds to vote in all local and general elections? Please allow me to expand. Our constituency has, in multiple respects, trailed behind the rest of our nation with respect to the equal treatment and rights of marginalised societal groups. From a recent inquiry by West Mercia Police published September 12th, which found that those of ethnic minorities are 5 times more likely to be stopped and searched, to the levels of net migration to Telford and Wrekin falling by 162 within the space of a year, there are too many times in which our council has found itself unable to assist the nation's fight towards equality. Without a firm shift in the impression of our local democratic system, how can our demography move towards the equality that we hope to achieve? To adequately represent the voice of our constituents, of all of our constituents, we must first invite them into the conversation. Because it starts with us, with councillors such as yourselves, councillors who are willing to be the impactors rather than those swept up by the sea of change that is inevitable for prosperity. It is you that have the power to encourage a positive change in the demography of our area, so that one day a young person such as myself may look out at our council, at our town, no matter who they may be, and see a representation of all of us, not the few of us. Votes at 16 is not a privilege. It is a vital democratic change. The rational cortex of the average brain does not fully develop until the age of 25, and yet there is no campaign for votes at 25. Why? Because it does simply not make sense to step backwards from progress. And so, to return to my earlier point regarding the startling lack of youth and ethnic minority representation within our council, besides you, of course, does there not seem to be a correlation between the marginalisation of such groups and the plain absence of polarising figures within the central government of our constituency? Perhaps one might even suggest that the conversations of change cannot begin until those without are given a platform for their voice. So please, allow votes at 16 to be the voice for our future conversations. Allow Telford to take a step forward into our democracy so that our demography may do the same. Thank you.
Well, yes. Okay. It just goes to show that, if you like, the old phrase of out of the mouths of children can come an awful lot of sense. There's no mistake about that. It was interesting to hear them speak. I enjoyed the clarity and the forcefulness that came with it. And can I say to some of us who are getting older, watch your back at the next election. Right, members. Are there any other contributions to the debate? Anyone? And Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm obviously going to speak strongly in support of this motion. I don't think I'm going to do as well, though, as the 3 young people who've just spoken. They've left very little to say, and I challenge any member in this chamber to do better than that in terms of putting the case. I will declare an interest. I was previously responsible for the oversight of a youth service in a local authority. I was involved in helping with the establishment of a youth council and local youth elections in that authority. So I saw firsthand how well young people picked up this initiative and organised the systems and processes that were required. This involvement strengthened their understanding of issues and how democracy works, and their views acted as a real challenge to the decision makers, not just in the local authority, but in other organisations locally as well. But it is important to see the lowering of the voting age to 16 as not standing in isolation from other measures, including work within schools to support young people's involvement and understanding of political processes. And we all have a part to play in that here. Developing standards and legal requirements for consulting and involving young people in decision making, and promoting young people within organisations to positions where they can really have an influence. I'd urge you to look at the Youth Parliament Manifesto, which and that talks about citizenship education and how it should be radically overhauled. It's a good read. Finally, I'd just say that this critical moment in this country's history, when decisions are being taken that will affect future generations, more than it will affect many of us in this room, young people must be heard. Votes at 16 is a minimum demand, not an ultimate demand. I strongly support this motion.
Who's the other one? Councillor Shirley Reynolds. No. Yeah, but I'm calling you. No, no.
Absolutely, ladies first, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
That
wasn't
won't
aware
get you
that
there
put
any
your hand up
faster.
really early. Okay. This isn't on. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having worked with young people in the borough for about the last 20 years, as a teacher and an educator, I'm delighted to be able to support this motion tonight. Our young people are our future, and they're the future of our borough. And I think in this celebratory Telford 50 year, this is one way that we could actually celebrate our young people by actually supporting this motion tonight and giving them their voice. The decisions we make today and the impact will be on their lives forever. They're the ones who are going to be affected most, not only by local but national decisions. And I can't fail to mention here Brexit. Those young people are the ones that are going to be affected most by whatever happens in 6 months. Our young people do need to be given that voice. I've been involved with youth forums and politics and with the education of young people for many years, and I know only too well their passion and enthusiasm for the young people when you actually let them and bring them into the debate. I will not go over all the facts and the statistics and the reasons why they should have that voice. They did that themselves tonight very eloquently. There was nobody in this room that could argue with those strong points. I was fortunate enough to be at the count for our member and deputy member of Youth Parliament, and I really believe that their voice should be heard, so I therefore support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Nigel Dugmore.
I've upset you, Nigel. I don't know how. But then I never do know how.
Right. Yeah, well, it was an excellent speeches from the Youth Parliament. Firstly, I'd like to take the opportunity to say how much I welcome the engagement of the Youth Parliament and the Young People's Forum with the Council. I hope that we can strengthen our working relationships between our organisations, which will help to support local democracy and engage an important sector of the population. Mr. Speaker, as with many changes to current practices, the devil is always in the detail, and what may seem at first sight a simple change has far-reaching implications across society, requiring a significant degree of change to existing legislation. These unintentional consequences will need careful debate, not just within Parliament and the judiciary, but also amongst the current teenage population, although they, of course, will not have to themselves be subject to any of the new legislation resulting from this initiative. For example, as mentioned in the motion, 16 to 18-year-olds can serve in the armed forces. However, they cannot and do not get to serve on the front line. With the centenary of the First World War armistice in a few weeks' time, are we happy as a society to make this the norm? It's just something to ponder. Indeed, there are even calls for the minimum age of recruitment to the armed forces to be increased from 16 to 18. So there's obviously a debate to be had. Similarly, if we accept that 16 is the age at which adulthood is legally recognised, then should 16 to 18-year-old offenders be sent to adult prisons? Should 16 to 18-year-olds be allowed to marry without parental consent or buy alcohol? In this age where knife crime is prevalent and we have regular knife amnesties, should we be significantly increasing the sector of the population that can buy knives? Police and Crime Commissioner's views would be interesting on this one. Mr. Speaker, those are just a few of the potential consequences of lowering the voting age, because it's all associated with it, and that will be needed to be debated fully before any legislation is proposed. Young people and society need to fully understand the implications of such a change. As I said earlier, those that would be directly affected by future legislation are too young to be consulted meaningfully, so society needs to take that decision on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the debate and hope it will be an apolitical debate, and it needs to be fully debated, and I'm quite happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Nigel. Tim?
Speaker, actually it was only to make a very brief intervention, because the arguments have been made eloquently by our young speakers and by the others who contributed to the debate. And I'm still making up my mind personally. On the one hand, I would feel probably a natural reticent, being conservative, so not resistant to change, but cautious of change. But if I look back at previous changes to the franchise, and indeed the biggest changes of the franchise in the 19th century were instituted by conservative governments. So I need personally to be mindful of that. What I did want to say, and perhaps on all our behalf, was, first of all, what an utter credit those three young people are to this borough, and we should be very, very proud indeed. Thank you for that. And then secondly, to close on a lighter point, I'm not really qualified to say whether the borough is currently in good hands or not, looking around all of the chamber, but certainly I think the future looks like it's going to be very good hands indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guy?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll just quickly make a few words, because I'd be lynched by my A-level tutor group if I didn't support this motion. I had a very good debate with them today of what was going to happen, and you would be very pleased to know they're 100% in support of lowering the age to 16, as you would expect. I'd just like to correct Councillor Doug Moore. I don't like to correct my fellow councillors. 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds can fight on the front line. Because of the Royal Navy, they're on board warships alongside people of my age, and they will fight and die on board a warship the same as anybody else. Okay, so he's completely wrong about that. So you have my 100% support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Tomlinson.
I want to echo, that was probably the three most eloquent speeches I think this House, this Council's heard for many a long time, and puts most of us councillors to shame. Articulate, intelligent, all the characteristics you want, not just from an elector, but someone that you would like to elect, and they'd certainly get my vote. Because I think this motion could almost go further than just giving them the right to vote. They should have the right to stand. And that would get my full support. If you're right to vote, you've got the right to stand and be elected. And it doesn't mention that here, but that would also get my full support. I think they needn't worry too much about having to have calculations and tests about intelligence and the fact it dips off at 25, or you peak at 25. I think most of us here, Conor, do forgive me because I know you're not included there, but most of us have gone past that peak. And in fact, some of us have probably regressed that much. We're probably below 16 in terms of ability to make decisions. And in fact, if you listen to some of the debate, some people might think it's 12-year-olds that are debating and not adults. So they sound more sensible than the majority of us. So I wholeheartedly support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Bill. can I say, Bill, that when I was 16, I was working 480 feet underground. So you didn't have much chance to do any canvassing, to stand for council or anything like that. I had to wait till I was 27. Right. Can I thank you all for the standard of that debate? It was very, very interesting. I'm sure the Youth Parliament delegates will have enjoyed it. Can I therefore ask Councillor Paul Watling to reply to the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you all members for the way you've met with our members of Youth Parliament tonight and representatives from the Youth Forum. It's a pleasure to go to our Youth Forum and to be involved in the Member of Youth Parliament Cant evenings. All candidates who stand for Member of Youth Parliament have to do a campaign DVD, which is sent round to all the schools. And to see the standard of all those DVDs, it's really what we've seen today is across all the candidates, not just the ones who have been successful. So I would say we have a group of young people we should all be very proud of in our town, and we should be standing up and applauding them, which I'm sure we will at the end. Can I say it's clear that there seems to be a consensus, and I'd like to move straight to the vote then, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Members, we shall move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please show. It is unanimous. Thank you, members. Oh, sorry, we've got one at the back again. You are against or abstaining? You're against? Oh, goodness. All bar one. The motion is carried. I don't think you understood. Yeah, what do you want to go back to? Just make sure that it's fully approved. Members, the Secretary is confused as to whether we actually confirmed the minutes of the previous meeting. We didn't. It's moved, seconded. All in favour? Anyone against? Thank you. Happy? What are we on now? Right, members. Can I call on the leader to give his report to council?
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I did have a speech written in respect of this evening's meeting. However, given the last 72 hours and the effect of the recent CQC report into our hospital services, I thought it was appropriate for me to address concerns there. For too long, there have been politicians in this town and politicians in this country that have sat on their hands whilst our National Health Service has been kicked and underfunded. There's been too many politicians in this town and in this country that have stood by whilst a trust, a failing, suffering trust, have attempted to recruit doctors, nurses and midwives. And there's been too many politicians in this town and in this country who have ignored staff, desperate staff, who have whistleblowed and have raised concerns around harassment and bullying. And the time is now for us as a council and for this council leader to explain to you what needs to happen urgently, because our town, our residents, our NHS staff deserve better than what they are getting. The reality of the situation, Mr. Speaker, is that this trust has an issue of poor leadership. And I've been attacked by some councillors in this chamber for putting forward a view that this administration has had issues with the current management team. And absolutely, I do not apologise for the fact I do have issues with the current management team, because the culture that they are overriding amongst their staff and patients is not good enough. It's not acceptable. But equally, Mr. Speaker, there are those politicians in this town and in this country that do nothing to stand up and be counted when it comes to our trust and our National Health Service, and that time must stop. Because the reality is, Mr. Speaker, I speak to doctors, I speak to nurses, I speak to midwives, I speak to managers, and what they need is desperate and urgent help. We've seen over the last 2 weeks 2 CQC enforcement notices relating to our A&E, both in Telford and in Shrewsbury, our midwifery and consultant-led maternity services. And I speak from personal experience myself, and I know that there are other members in this chamber who have had recent experience of our midwifery services in SAF. 18 months ago, my son was born in the midwife-led unit here in Telford, and I could not question the dedication or the ability or the passion of our NHS workers. But what I can question, and what I do question, is the commitment of this government, the commitment of these NHS chief executives and his senior team to make the right decisions for this community and for his staff. So, Mr. Speaker, let there be a strong message, united strong message, I hope, that now enough is enough. We need a rescue plan for our local hospital, a rescue plan backed by members of Parliament, backed by councillors of whatever political persuasion, to say that we need more additional resources, more doctors, more nurses, and we need them now.
Thank you, Leader. Item 6, the Mayor's announcements. Your Appendix B.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've had an exciting couple of months since I began my role as Mayor back in May this year. I've attended a variety of engagements, from local charity dinners, opening of our new Sky Reach and disc golf facilities in the town park, summer fairs and Telford 50 celebrations. As we near the autumn season, I've also had the privilege to congratulate the next round of graduates out to our local university campuses. I've continued my focus on my pledge for the year in support of my Building Bridges theme. I visited a number of schools across the borough, as well as nursing and residential homes. I've attended citizenship ceremonies and welcomed a variety of faiths and cultures to our town. I've taken the time out of my normal schedule to meet some of the local businesses and hotels, both large and small, including the Shropshire Star in the town centre. Last week, I had the opportunity to welcome the Chinese delegation to the town, which has opened many new doors for future business relations. In late July, I officially launched my charity appeal and have to date raised $2,600 so far. I would like to thank all of those who have supported me since my appointment. It's been a great start to the year. I look forward to the journey ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
I have one more special announcement. The winner of the Big Green Vote is Judy Moore, who's won the top prize, a garden wildlife hamper sponsored by CJ Wildlife. She's receiving her prize in her favourite green space, Dale End Park. And I invite Councillor Rich Overton to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, the Big Green Vote was a great success. 96 new sites were voted upon, and the top 50 got £1,000 to enhance the site. And it's great that those people who took part were entered into this competition. And it's great that Judy Moore has won her a hamper, and she will be collecting that, and as you said, in her favourite green site. It's great that we have now over 200 green sites that have the green guarantee, and that is what the people of this town wanted to see. Thank you.
Are there any questions? No? Right, we will now go on to the public questions, and we have one from Councillor Carol Scott, MBE.
I'm not a councillor. I'm not a councillor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer to my January question and subsequent reply from Councillor McClements. Can I be assured, as indicated, that the Member for Finance will consider the concessionary travel for the cohort of 1950s women still waiting their state pension in the next round of budget setting? Suggestions were in my covering email. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Carol. As my colleague Councillor McClements confirmed, the whole of the Cabinet is in favour of expanding concessionary travel to a number of groups, including WASPy women, and we continue to look at ways in which we can do this sustainably. However, we face some pretty fundamental obstacles. First, any expansion of the concessionary scheme would need to be funded from our revenue budget. This budget, as you know, has been cut by 117 million by the government since 2010, with a further cut of nearly 30 million over the next 2 years. The cuts programme has continued despite evidence that an increase in adult social care and children's safeguarding costs alone are spiralling to the tune of millions year on year. Secondly, to compound that, we've got a government who seek to transfer more responsibilities to local authorities, but then who also refuse to transfer the required funding to take on these extra responsibilities. It might be of interest to note that they've already started to renege on their offer to allow local authorities to retain 100% of local business rates. Thirdly, and more relevantly to the point about bus travel, we also face a monopoly of the private companies who run our bus services. I know that Councillor Hilda Rhodes and I are deeply frustrated that their profit motive has led to proposals for the rationalisation of their existing services, including vital rural services in our borough. I can cite the recent move to cut the Saturday service of the 519 service as a case in point. That said, we will consider funding for a scheme as part of the budget round we will undertake shortly. In addition, we will continue to look for alternative external resources of funding if and when they arise, and continue to lobby the government to provide a solution to this, and I may add, the wider WASPy cause.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor. No, that was only in these comments. We were not talking about the five.
That particular service, at its present moment, looks like being retained due to the efforts of Councillor Burrow and myself.
Oh, have we got the medals tray? No. Item 8. Cabinet decisions made since the meeting of the Council. Appendix C, your page 24. Are there any questions on this? Councillor Hoskin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With regards to K214, will the Cabinet Member of Customer and Neighbourhood Services assure that all the fleet vehicles owned by Telford and Wrekin will be ultra-low emission vehicles in a quick and timely manner to comply with the Council's strategy as stated on pages 214 to 244 Cabinet Papers of the 13th of September? I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoskin.
Unfortunately, Councillor Hoskins is referred to a Cabinet post that no longer exists, so it falls between a number of portfolios. I'm more than happy to answer as leader. We have a stated ambition, of course, to roll out our commitment to green and electric energy. However, as Councillor Carter has clearly stated, and something that continues to be ignored by some councillors in this chamber. When the government are cutting £117 million a year from your budget each and every year, unfortunately there are things that we're unable to do. However, our policy commitment, as stated, is that ambition. We work with government, we work with the LGA and other authorities, including Conservative-led authorities who are more realistic to the financial challenges that local government face today.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Dugmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've got questions on two. One, 2.1.3, procurement update. Could I just ask the Cabinet member, does he actually read the reports? And in fact, do any of the Cabinet members read the reports, as there are some questionable things on there? We didn't mention them at the Cabinet last week to see if anybody actually spotted them, and they didn't. I refer to the double entry of a £100 million contract, the cost to the council of £35,000 to pay for a fire alarm at an academy school. Academy schools, as you will know, are directly funded by the government, and therefore I question why the council is spending money and supporting them when they've already got the money for it. And also, could the Cabinet member give an explanation as to why Telford and Wrekin is spending £20,000 on physiotherapy services for selected staff members, and also £100,000 on this year's pantomime? And oh yes, he is.
Oh, no, they're not. Would you like to do that again? It was really interesting.
Correct. So, you know, with council services, as we've just heard, under severe pressure, I think we deserve an explanation as to why this procurement has been put in place. Do you want me to sit down and then do the health question, or do you want me to give you that now as well?
No, sit down.
Right.
And you can have this answer.
Speaker, I will provide an answer in writing. I don't intend to respond to the derogatory part of his derogatory opening statement. I do find it absolutely distasteful, though, that he uses this forum to attack the work of officers of this authority who are under immense pressure given the cuts that we face. I'll provide him with the other details in writing. Disgraceful. Disgraceful. Bully. You're a bully.
Would you...
Right. Question on 2.1.5, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Cabinet member why we are continuing with the weight and obesity?
Can I point out to you that the question that you are asking is not on the key question list. So you've jumped the gun a little bit again.
What? It's Cabinet decision.
No.
Sorry?
It's key decisions, not Cabinet.
Yeah, right, okay. Right. So where's that on the agenda then?
I've just told you. Right.
Cabinet decisions made since the last meeting.
It's 2.1.5.
It's cabinet decisions made since the last meeting.
No.
Well, my question also relates, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, to the Cabinet report. So am I allowed to ask a question? 2.1.4 on ultra-low emission vehicle strategy. Is that appropriate, yeah? Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whilst I greatly welcome this report, please could the Cabinet Member for Transport confirm what work has been conducted to ensure hydrogen and fuel cell electric vehicles are considered as part of the strategy? As whilst there is great reference to electric vehicles within the report, there is virtually no mention of hydrogen vehicles and refuelling stations, which personally should be an integral part of the vision for ultra-low emission vehicles in this borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola.
Is being considered. However, I think that it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that this government has created a crisis in diesel cars. Jaguar Land Rover, just down the road from us here, Mr. Speaker, and with significant supply chain companies in Telford, employing hundreds of workers on decent pay, are in a situation where the government are ignoring them and the advances that they're making. I don't hear a word about that from the opposition on this issue, which is a great shame.
Thank you, Sean.
Mr. Speaker. It's an absolutely no relation. You can still have it in your strategy. It's completely ridiculous.
It is an answer because he said so. Don't argue with me, Nicola. I've just told you. That is an answer. That's all the answer you're going to get. Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a slightly tongue-in-cheek question, if you don't mind. I really welcome the, on 2.1.4, the ultra-low emission vehicle strategy that we're undertaking, but in my definition, an ultra-low emission vehicle is also a bicycle, and it would be nice to know at some future stage as to what we're going to do to encourage people to use bicycles to get to work and how they can get them safely and have showers. Now, I know it's not on this particular paper, but I would really welcome, maybe not a written answer on this one, but a commitment to come back to us at some later stage. Thank you, Mister.
Can you give that commitment, Mr. Leader? Thank you. What have we got to now? Now, members, item 9 is the political balance of the council. Appendix D. Can I call on Councillor Sean Davis?
I'd like to move the recommendations in the report. There is a slight amendment in respect of the recommendations, but it is detailed in the appendix, which is in regards to the Fire Authority. In fact, following further examination of the political makeup of the Fire Authority, both here in Telford Wrekin and across the county, the additional or the change will go from a Labour member to a Lib Dem independent member.
Thank you, Paul. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Ray Evans? Yeah. Is there any other councillor wishes to speak? No. Can I therefore put it to the vote? All those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? Right, the motion is carried. Thank you, members. Item 10. Item 10, members. We have the opportunity now for members to are invited to question the appropriate cabinet member. And the first one is from Councillor Angela Eade. We'll ask the following question of Councillor Sean Davis, the leader. Will the current council leader give me the full costs and a complete breakdown of officer and member time, preparation, transport, accommodation, dinner, drinks, etc. incurred as part of the recent at the recent ABSI Awards and any other awards process in the past 3 years?
Speaker, Telford Wrekin Council, its partners and our staff have had the great privilege over the last few years to be nominated for many awards, and we've had the great privilege of being finalists in many awards too. And indeed, only last week we were nominated through the Association of Public Service Excellence for Council of the Year. And although we didn't scoop that particular prize this year, Mr. Speaker, we did scoop a prize in regards to our collaboration partnership working with various partners in regards to the land deal. Mr. Speaker, the vast majority of people who represent the council in such or on such awards evenings are council staff, and it's a small way, I feel, that we can recognise the staff an input of their hard work. Over the last 3 years, we have spent £4,259 on attending ABSI Awards.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Weed has once again got another question.
Do I have a supplementary question for that?
Oh, yes.
You didn't invite me. Well, the supplementary question is, I would like an answer to the question, because if you read it, it does say there, and the leader has dealt with the APSI awards at 4,200 and whatever pounds it was, which is a substantial amount of money. And it does say any other similar awards process over the past 3 years. And that includes many other award systems, and I was asking for a breakdown of costs on that, which I haven't received.
Mr. Speaker, I'm more than happy to deal with the specific question in a written answer. However, I think that the question was a little bit ambiguous and therefore was difficult to answer. But what I will say to the Chamber, Mr. Speaker, is isn't it a great shame that yet again we hear the opposition councillors attacking staff for going on award evenings where they are recognised and celebrated.
Correction, Speaker, I was asking for a detail of the cost. No more than that.
And just a moment. The reality is...
just answer the question. The reality, sort of waffle.
The reality, Mr. Speaker, is if members of our staff and members of the community will know full well that if this was a genuine question with no ability to try to score political points, then this question would be emailed to me or to the managing director if it was a genuine question. The reality is it's silly party political games that the Leader of the Opposition is trying to play and unfortunately, yet again, involving members of our staff, which is appalling.
Thank you, Councillor Shortall-Davies.
We used to.
Right. Question 3 from Councillor Eade.
Question 2.
No, sorry, Councillor 2. Councillor Eade, question 2. Would you like to read your question out so that there is no confusion?
But I will. Will the current council leader tell me how much has been or will be paid to the performing group Colabro, and how much of this has been recouped or is outstanding following the recent cancellation?
Speaker, for commercial sensitivity reasons, I'm unable to provide the confirmation of the artist's fee, and I can confirm, Mr. Speaker, that formal legal proceedings are now in place following the breach of contract in regards to the artist's management company. This legal action will ensure that the event will be cost neutral to the council. I can also confirm that members of the public who purchased tickets have been refunded, and this forms part of the legal claim against the artist company, management company. Commenting further on this point puts at risk the council's litigation and would therefore be inappropriate to do so.
Are you sure? Supplementary?
Well remembered, Speaker. I do have a supplementary question, and that, of course, stems from the answer I've just been given. Is it possible now to give a limit of the legal costs of actually fighting this? Because although I accept what he said, it's commercially confidential, that you can't tell us what the contract was worth and everything, but it will come out in time, and we will certainly be pressing for that. But I'd also like to know, because this is being compounded by going to litigation as well, with the risk of losing. This is public money. Now, I suspect that together with the cost of litigation and the cost of the contract and reimbursing and everything else, that this may well amount to a substantial sum of money. And what I would like is some sort of envelope around that, where it is possible to say roughly how much potentially this could cost council taxpayers in the borough.
Mr. Speaker, as is in common with the civil procedure rules, pre-litigation conversations have taken place between the council and the management company that has unfortunately meant that formal litigation is required. What I would say again, Mr. Speaker, and again, members of staff and members of the community will know full well what this question is all about, trying to point score and have a go at council officers. Because the reality is, Mr. Speaker, most members of our community know full well that I don't, councillors don't, of any political persuasion, deal with the level of detail in regards to exchanging the contracts with an individual artist. Of course, our teams do, our staff do. What I can say is, what I've been briefed, is that our staff have worked incredibly hard, and they've worked with due diligence to ensure that public money is protected at all times. and not pursuing this act for a breach of contract would be a failure of duty to recover public money, and would be rightly criticised by the auditors for not doing so.
Thank you, Sean. Have you got any supplementary, Andrew?
That was a supplementary, Speaker.
Right. Item 3. You're here again. Councillor Andrew Eade, that's the following question.
Yes, thank you. I'll be careful not to mention the word officer again. Nobody's mentioned officers whatsoever throughout this. And it is all smoke and mirrors and, of course, a great smokescreen. But I'll ask to try again. Will the current leader of the council give me a full breakdown of the costs incurred with events associated with and including the big top at Telford Town Park? This to include a separate list of refunds, compensation due to cancellations, removal of booked seats, weather integrity or any other cause. Now, a simple answer on that, this is public money, and I'm interested where public money is being spent. Not interested in what officers are involved in it, I haven't mentioned that at all. So do try and concentrate on the question if you can.
Mr. Speaker, I will answer the question in the way that I feel fit to answer it. And I won't take any lessons from the former leader of this council who dodged every question that he was asked over the time that he was leader, past leader, that is. Mr. Speaker, the Big Top was fantastic for our town. We had 14 big shows which attracted over 10,000 people. It was the central piece of our summer events for Telford at 50, which we know that the Conservative members opposite voted against the Telford at 50 money, and that's completely legitimate. They did that. They now turn up to events and try and take credit for it, but there you are. So this event was central to our summer event programme. And it was the first time that we've done such a bold offering. We deliberately made the event part of our Telford at 50 offering, and like other events, we subsidised and made available discounted tickets. This was a direct alternative to raising ticket prices further for our members of the public or reducing the quality of the acts that we could secure. I would like to thank Telford Shopping Centre, who sponsored the event with a £10,000 donation, which together with the grant of from Telford at 50 of just over £50,000 made the event possible. Over 50% of those who book tickets have never been to our theatre events. This offers the team and the council an opportunity to reach out to those people to generate additional income and to invest an interest in our theatre that we are standing here today. During the events, there was a big boost in secondary spend. The feedback from those who attended was absolutely fantastic. And the team worked really hard with those customers who, for whatever reason, felt their experience wasn't as good as it could have been. Of the nearly £53,000 of ticket income that we generated through this event, there was just over £2,000 of refunds for various reasons, including those mentioned in the question. However, of these £2,000 of refunds, the majority amounted to theatre vouchers, and therefore the income to the council was protected. And Mr. Speaker, the vast majority of customers who experienced an issue for whatever reason were more than happy with these remedies.
Thank you, Sean. Andrew, any supplementary?
Yes, funny enough, I have. And it's one of accepting that the council leader seems pretty well incapable or defensive of answering straight questions on this. And I think it's a sad day when a member of this authority who asks a question, quite legitimately on council expenditure, can't get a bloody straight answer. Now,
language.
I do apologise, of course. Now, that leaves me with the situation of having to issue FOI requests on my own council. Now, that is unacceptable, and it is something that we will certainly bear in mind. You cannot have a democratically elected members of this authority asking straightforward questions, and that's what they are on expenditure, to receive that sort of waffle, because that's what it was. Barely any figures have been mentioned in there at all. Now, I'm not going to let it go, and we'll issue FOI requests for all of those.
Can I draw your attention, Councillor Reid, that the last 5 minutes of your speech then was not a question, it was a ramble on.
All right, I'll ask the question. Do you mind if I issue FOI requests,
No,
Speaker?
sit down.
Thank you very much.
Next question, would you believe it? It's from Councillor Andrew Eade. Now, it says on my sheet, and what it says on yours, Andrew, to the leader.
No, it doesn't.
No.
No,
it should be to the deputy leader.
It does indeed. Now I'm going to try my luck there. Let's see if we can get a straightforward answer this time round. Although I suspect maybe not, but hey, ever the optimist. Could the relevant Cabinet member inform me how no conflict of interest will occur with planning decision making and consultation as a result of the privatisation of services via APT Group in the Council Planning Control Team? Could he also make available a copy of the Council's mitigation strategy regarding this issue?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There has been no privatisation services via APT. All officers acting under the APT brand are employees of the Council. APT does not act for applicants in the submission of plan applications within the borough, so there is no conflict of interest. There is no mitigation strategy because there is no need for one.
The legal minefield.
Well, I mean, this isn't a question, it's a statement. Can I at least thank the Deputy Leader for a straightforward question? It does... answer, yeah. It does raise several legal issues around that, and certainly about the mitigation strategy, which we will obviously need to pursue and perhaps bring back. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 5, Councillor Stephen Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll find you what I'm supposed to be asking. It's on the solar farm. Where did it say? Yeah, thank you, James. In what areas does the council-owned solar farm provide energy?
Thank you for the question. The energy generated by the solar farm is sold through a power purchase agreement, which is basically a contract between the council as a generator and a customer, where electricity is sold wholesale in a single block. This is currently the best financial option for the council. However, we will continue to keep this under review.
Supplementary.
Could then I'd be told, how is this reflected in their household energy bills? Solar power on a private house generates the electricity and you get a rebate. Does the same happen here?
Yes. We sell the energy into the grid. We generate, in terms of energy, I'll just give him some numbers on the solar farm because I know he's been a sceptic of it. 1.4 million in net income for the council. 4.4 million to be generated over the lifetime of that facility. 15.8% return on investment. 14.4 gigawatt hours of renewable energy, 3,000 home equivalent supplied to, 7,200 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions. There's some few more numbers that he might be interested in. 21 Conservative councillors who voted against, one of whom said that the sun doesn't shine enough in Telford to make it work. 32 other councillors who voted for it and are responsible for generating £1.5 million for this council for frontline services who are facing £117 million worth of cuts from the Conservative government.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. I don't think that answers the question. I'm not interested in facts and figures. I want to know if those that receive that energy from this solar farm get it.
Can I ask, Stephen, that if you don't accept the... Will you be quiet? Will you... If you're not satisfied with the answer, you know the recourse to that is you write to the said person and ask him so that you will get your written confirmation. Whether it's the one that you want is a different thing. But it always seems, and time again, I have to tell you, yes, right, 15 minutes, and don't go to sleep because I will have to wake you up. Item 6, wake up. The next question is from you. Would you like to read it out?
This is for Councillor Sean Davis.
It says Richard Overton, it says here.
No, I know I sent it to Councillor Sean Davis because I want a legal opinion within the answer. Go ahead. Will I get it from Councillor Sean Davis?
It depends.
It's no work, not even worth asking the question then.
Fine. Let's go next one.
Yours is the next one.
Are you withdrawing your question then?
Well, if I can't get the answer I want, Malcolm, I might as well, mightn't I?
My name is not Malcolm to you, I'm Mr. Speaker. Yeah. And you have, as far as I'm concerned, you've withdrawn your question. As far as I'm concerned, you have withdrawn your question. Right. Now shut up.
Seven on the agenda?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. What support, either current or historical, does the Gower project in St George's have from this council?
I'm pleased he's clarified that question because the wording was slightly confusing. I'll detail to him what's happened with the Gower project because I think that's where he's going. The Gower project focuses on the site of the Gower Street School building, as we all know. It's been used for a variety of purposes over the year and is seen to be important to the history and heritage of St George's. Freehold ownership sits with Telford Wrekin Council. In 2014, the council and a group of local people who later became the Gower Heritage and Enterprise Foundation and who are independent of the council carried out a consultation on the future of the building which indicated that residents wanted to see the building return to some form of community use. In 2015, the council set aside £650,000 to support this vision, and the Cabinet at the time agreed that the council would support the project and that the capital funding would be set aside for refurbishment and that it would be released subject to the development of an appropriate business plan. Since 2015, Telford Wrekin Council has worked with the Gower Heritage and Enterprise Foundation to develop the project. The council's support has included advice, guidance and the financial support previously mentioned. This has resulted in the Gower Heritage and Enterprise Foundation submitting an application for funding to the Heritage Lottery Fund. That application was submitted by the group with a letter of support from the council in August this year. It's anticipated that a decision will be made by the HLF on the first stage application in December.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did this authority have any influence on any managerial appointment for the project, and did any remuneration for that post does it come from this authority?
No.
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Question 8. Councillor Jane Pinter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the I can never get that word out. Can the Reverend, thank you. Cabinet member, please give members an update on the progress towards the establishment of the local independent inquiry into CSE since the last meeting of the cross-party member advisory panel on the 20th of June 2018. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Jane. Speaker, I might need to expand on this. There's a lot of detail in this answer, and I think it's important that all of the members here hear it. Members will be aware that the signing off of the agreement to go out to tender for the commission of an independent body who will oversee the appointment of independent chair and the setting of the terms of reference in full consultation with survivors was done on the 20th of June, 12 weeks ago. Just to recap quickly on that process, this process has been deliberately set up to ensure double independence in delivering an inquiry. And the reasons for that are to maintain the confidence of the public and, most importantly, the survivors. It was arrived at as a result of the fact that to have councillors or council officers selecting a chair or setting the terms of reference, as was being suggested in various motions put forward to this chamber, is considered totally unsatisfactory by survivors, given the experience of Rotherham, who appointed their own chair and their own terms of reference. This was stage one of the process. And as I say, the signing off of that stage one was done by the members' advisory panel made up of cross-party members on the 20th of June. That was delayed slightly, as members of that panel unanimously agreed that the involvement of survivors should take place at stage one, not as at stage two as originally suggested. This has taken the form of a survivors committee who represent survivors and their families. Today that is at least 15 survivors, but that number is growing. At stage two of the process, the commission of an independent body, we set an ambitious timetable for the recruitment and the selection of the commissioning body that would have seen it established by now. However, there are two main reasons the process has been slightly extended. Firstly, and most importantly, very quickly, it was established through conversations with survivors' representatives that there were concerns about some of the detail of the process. This included, amongst other things, the fact that the survivors felt they were not being sufficiently consulted at the stage of the process where the terms of reference will be set. It was also recognised that they needed some independent legal support, which the council had agreed to fund. Our ongoing conversations are proving to be really fruitful, and we are listening and changing what had originally been proposed in some significant ways to suit the survivors. The survivors have said to us that they would rather the process was delayed and we get it right, rather than hurry just to meet an arbitrary timetable. The second reason for the extension of the timetable was feedback from potential bidders that the timetable, occurring over the summer holiday period, was simply too tight. When we considered this, alongside the survivors' wishes, it was obvious that a longer timetable would be better. We want well-considered bids from serious, credible organisations. This approach, I hope, demonstrates to everyone just how seriously we are taking this inquiry and our commitment to doing the best by the survivors and the victims. If we were rushing this process, then it would be right for questions to be raised, but this process is being done collaboratively and done thoroughly with the survivors at the heart of it. In addition, I think we should bring it to members' attention that there are, of course, several other things that happened relating to the setting up of this inquiry, because let's not forget that tackling these crimes against our community is an ongoing day-to-day priority. You'll have heard the news recently that we have supported the establishment of the Holly Project, and we've been working with those who have been working with those affected and are working with the survivors and the voluntary sector to commission support for the longer term. We've made an immediate extension of funding to March 2019 with a longer term package of £200,000 in place. Second, we continue to invest heavily into the KATE team, who provide our frontline approach to this issue. I should say KATE is Children Abuse or Exploitation, and that's a social work team. We are investing many hundreds of thousands of pounds more on this area alone than when we came into office in 2011. This is despite the fact that we continue to receive cuts from central government to the very funding which provides these services. We also continue to apply for funding from government, which to date has not been forthcoming. I'm also pleased to report that we are now meeting next week with the MP for Telford to brief on the process and other information. Speaker, I just want to make a couple of final points. When setting out on this task on behalf of the Cabinet, I set some basic tests for each of the actions we take. First of all, does what we do meet the terms of the mission we set out collectively as a council in terms of the independent inquiry? Secondly, importantly, does what we do help progress the cause of survivors? Thirdly, and most importantly, does what we do meet with the approval and the agreement of survivors? Mr. Speaker, I am more than confident that we continue to meet all of those three basic tests.
Thank you, Lee. Supplementaries? No supplementaries? No. Can we move on? Motion. Yeah. Notice of motion. First one is there. It's from Councillor Angela McClements. I understand there's an amendment to the way it is.
That's correct, Mr. Speaker. And before I speak on this motion, I would like to alter my motion, which, whilst is specifically related to White Ribbon, the alteration quite rightly recognises that men are also affected by domestic violence, and members should have a copy of the proposed alteration on their desk. And I would like to ask Mr. Speaker that this altered motion is heard first. Thank you. So I'm proposing that.
Thank you, Angela.
I'll second that, Speaker.
Have a seconder, right? Right. I'm putting this out for debate now. Angela, would you like to come and prepare your justification for it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I brought this motion to full council tonight to recognise that we have been a white ribbon for 5 years. There are currently 57 local authorities across England who are white ribbon towns from right across the political spectrum, and I am proud that Telford and Wrekin Council is one of that growing list of local authorities. Members will know that I have long campaigned and raised the issue of domestic abuse, both in this chamber and out in the public domain. I don't do it just in, as we come up to local elections. I've been consistent for many years. It's something I do feel passionate about, and as a white ribbon town, we must continue to campaign against all forms of domestic abuse. And why? Well, let's be honest, the majority of us here in this chamber will probably know of someone, either a family member, friend, colleague, or a neighbour, who's been affected by domestic abuse. It's prevalent, and we are told that more than 80% of victims do not even report these incidents to the police. And the facts, members, are pretty frightening. 2 women are killed every week in England and Wales by a current or former partner, and 3 women commit suicide as a result of domestic abuse. 1 in 4 women in England and Wales will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. 1 in 4. And domestic violence has a high rate of repeat victimisation than any other crime. And let's not forget in all of these stats the impact to children, where 90% of domestic violence incidents in family households are where the children were in the same room or the next room. 550,000, that's over 500,000 adult offenders were cautioned, convicted or released from custody between July 2010 and June 2011. Around 140,000 committed a re-offence, with a proven re-offending rate of 25%. And for those that were starting a court order, the re-offending rate was 34%. That was 1 sample for 1 year, and these trends remain. They're shocking stats, aren't they? But there are many more. Members will be aware that our own Standards Committee met last October to discuss the consultation on disqualification criteria for local authority members from the DCLG, the Department for Communities and Local Government, a government body. There were 4 questions covered, 2 on anyone who is on the sex offenders register and 2 on any individual who's been issued with a civil injunction or a criminal behaviour order. All members of that cross-party committee agreed that individuals should be prohibited from acting for public office. Unbelievably, there was not 1 question in the consultation paper relating to anyone who's been convicted or admitted to domestic violence. The consultation was totally inadequate and inept and failed to acknowledge the importance of this issue. It is therefore vital that we call on the government to look again at the disqualification criteria for local authorities. It's clearly not robust enough. It is important that we as councillors set the standards and lead by example. People put their trust and faith in us. That's why we're calling on the government to review its policy on anyone who holds public office who in the past and present have admitted, i.e. someone who's been formally received and accepted a police caution, or someone who's been convicted of domestic abuse should be barred from public office. The government need to be tough on this. Its current policy is far too weak. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to thank those people who run the Freedom Programme, both here at the Council and also at the YMCA in Wellington. They do an amazing job supporting victims and survivors of domestic abuse. And I would also like to take this opportunity to mention to members that as part of reaffirming being a white ribbon town for 5 years, the Women's Quilt is coming to Telford on the weekend of the 27th, 28th of October at Southwater Library. If anyone doesn't know what the Women's Quilt is, it is a quilt made up of 598 patches, each one representing a woman who was killed as a result of domestic violence between 2009 and 2015. That is approximately 2 women murdered every week. And this quilt acts as a poignant reminder that domestic abuse is unfortunately still the norm for too many women. And I hope all members will take the opportunity to visit this amazing but very emotive piece of work. So I hope everyone will support this motion tonight. It's only by standing up and being counted that we can hope to end all domestic abuse. Thank you.
Councillor Gilly Reynolds.
please, Speaker.
Okay. Councillor. Councillor Furnival.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to make it clear to all members of this chamber that I wholeheartedly support the Council's commitment to raising awareness and reducing the incidence of domestic violence across our borough. It is a fact that both women and men are affected by domestic violence, and we should be encouraging anyone who is a victim of such adherent crimes to come forward, as by only shining a light on the domestic abuse faced by women, this could further discourage men to speak out. According to ONS figures in 2017, there are 269 refugee or safe houses for victims of domestic violence in the UK, which only 27 of those are male supporting organisations. And in a 12-month period over 2016 and 17, 13 men were killed by their female partners after acts of domestic violence were reported but not followed up by authorities. It is a saddening fact that 50% of all men who contact the Mankind Initiative helpline have never spoken to anyone before about the abuse they have or are suffering, and 71% would not have called if the helpline was not anonymous. It is important as members that we understand the reality and scale of the issues that face our borough and encourage funding for services that offer support to victims, absolutely. But I also encourage this council to consider its position on restorative justice, as rehabilitation and repairing the harm that has been caused is an important part of our criminal justice system. Within this, offenders learn to acknowledge the consequences and their actions and control their emotions. As a council, we do have a duty to stand as advocates against all forms of violence against men and women. We should, in fact, stop saying men and women, all forms of violence, full stop. But it is not for this council to serve judgment on anybody, absolutely not, as it is our justice system that will deliver their verdict on a suitable punishment, conviction, fine or community service, something our leader will know much more about than me. And it is important that we look as members at extending the disqualification period for all convictions. For men and women that are convicted, justice is also delivered to them in many ways, by living in fear, losing their jobs and their friends, restricted access to their children. Some suffer from severe anxiety or depression, and in unfortunate cases, some have taken their own lives. Fact. Therefore, whilst I greatly support the principle of the motion, it is disappointing that it fails to incorporate wider convictions and at the last minute has recognised that domestic abuse is suffered by not only women, but also by men. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Councillor Reid.
Right, thank you, Speaker. We will be supporting Angela's motion because we fully understand the reasoning behind it and also agree with the basic thrust of the motion. Domestic violence, together with violence of any sort, can never be condoned. However, there are parts of this motion which would be simply inoperable and could not be put into effect. These issues, which I will come to, are poorly crafted and could never be put on the statute books.
Neither do they take into account the principles of restorative justice and rehabilitation of offenders on which the Labour Party were once so strong. In supporting the motion, we will distance ourselves from the third paragraph entirely. As I said, it is inoperable. And further, we do not believe that it goes far enough to effectively deal with anyone in public office. The motion's proposal to bar anybody who admits to domestic violence is open to wide-scale abuse, of false accusations, intimidation, bullying and coercion. And let's be honest, we've all seen plenty of that happen at this authority. A confession is not proof in law, as are not accusations. So it is important that barring somebody from public office is based on the law, proof and a conviction, which has included a jail sentence. We proposed to replace paragraph 3 with the following. This council notes the current disqualification criteria for any individual to serve on a local authority if they have incurred a conviction and jail sentence in excess of 3 months over the previous 5-year period. However, this council believes that this disqualification period is now insufficient and should be extended further in time. Disqualification should also apply to any conviction which incurs a jail sentence of any term. Now, for whatever reason, the Labour administration on this council felt unable to debate this amendment, and I think that is actually a great shame, and it's an opportunity that's been lost. We also believe that the original motion, as was proposed by Angela, as on the order paper, is fundamentally flawed, as it does not include any specific mention of domestic violence against men, something which I have personally come across. I am gratified that Angela has at least belatedly listened to this part of our concerns and has amended her motion to reflect our stance on what is a very important issue. We will be writing separately to the borough's 2 MPs to inform them of our views, which clearly differ from that of this administration. And as I said, what is being proposed in this motion is absolutely unworkable. It needs to be thought through, and it's a great shame that you didn't change it. Although this motion does not deliver the tougher disqualification criteria, which we believe is a necessary sanction, or did not originally mention domestic violence against men, we will, as I said earlier, be supporting the basic thrust and sentiment of this motion. But some of the ill-conceived and unworkable parts you really do need to think of again. But we understand from all sorts of standpoints why this motion has been brought forward. I would like and ask that our views on this and the motion, the amendment we wish to put forward, are in fact included in the council minutes.
Thank you, Andrew. We can add them to the council minutes. Shall be done.
Thank you.
Councillor Ray Evans.
Mr Speaker, during my year as Mayor, this Council became very aware of my strength of feeling on the issue of domestic abuse and my support for the White Ribbon movement. But tonight I stand to speak as a community leader, a Quaker and as a woman. And I do so because domestic abuse is an issue of equality, or more accurately, inequality. Whilst accepting the inclusion of men in the amended motion, if it enables the other side to support it, prevalent statistics show that women and children are disproportionately affected by men's violence, and I make no apology for focusing on that fact. In intimate relationships, domestic abuse is perpetrated almost entirely by men. We come from a position where historically women were the property of men, and it appears that some men continue to live under that dangerous delusion. Domestic abuse is about one thing: control and power over another human being. Women's descriptions of domestic abuse indicate a pattern which typically includes tactics of control, humiliation, degradation, and the abdication of responsibility by the man who blames the woman. And let's be clear, Domestic abuse is the hidden end of a consortium of violence against women in our society, a continuum that includes CSE. None of us would support the idea that it's okay to strike a passing stranger in the street, or to extort money from them, or on a daily basis challenge their grip on reality. So how is it that in the 21st century, women are still abused in their own homes, in front of their children, forced into marriages or commercial sexual exploitation against their will, and objectified in the media? How is it that in the 21st century, some men still think that it's excusable and acceptable to strike an intimate partner and subject her to levels of psychological abuse that create trauma and lifelong damage? Council, if something overwhelmingly affects one section of the population, why don't we do something about it? Society has to change, and we're better to start than by taking this public stance on domestic abuse, both as an institution and as individuals. Surely there can be no argument that the actions of an abuser are fundamentally incompatible with the principles of public office, something to which we all adhere. I therefore call on every person in this chamber to show that they are committed to equality in our society and to vote for this motion and not the amended motion, so that violence against women can become a thing of the past.
Councillor Dugmore.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I fully support the sentiments of this motion, though the wording, as my mother would say, was a little cack-handed. Before being amended, anyone would have thought that domestic abuse was only perpetrated by men and only women are victims. It is ridiculous to ignore a significant and largely hidden part of domestic abuse. Perhaps here lies some of the problem in that even supposedly well-informed members of society ignore the wider picture. Whatever happened to gender equality? Mr. Speaker, this motion, if it made it to the statute books, would be a manna from heaven for defence lawyers. How can you bar someone from public office for admitting to domestic abuse? How could you ever in court prove beyond reasonable doubt that someone in the privacy of their home had not been coerced or forced by a partner to admit to abuse? It would encourage certain types of abuse. Where do you draw the line, Mr. Speaker? What about professional misconduct? If a member falls foul of their professional body, should that not prevent them from holding public office as well? Mr. Speaker, while I fully support the White Ribbon campaign, I feel that any motion should be inclusive and reiterate the point that domestic abuse is not gender-specific, and acknowledge the existing rules that prevent people from standing for public office. We as a society believe in restorative justice. Well, most of us do. And if no one convicted of a crime can ever hope for redemption and be able to contribute positively to society, then we're in danger of setting up a very dystopian society, which is a dangerous path to take.
Councillor Gilly Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to formally second the motion tonight, and I've just had some thoughts really whilst listening to the opposition. Frankly, to hijack a motion about justice for victims by calling for sympathy for abusers is simply unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. To hijack this motion to say that victims may make false allegations is disgusting. To hijack this motion which focuses on the thousands of women who get abused every year by talking about men, it is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. As local representatives, it's our responsibility to make things workable. That's our responsibility. And all I'm seeing from the opposition is a dilution on our stance. That's what I'm seeing. We are a white ribbon town. We're a white ribbon town. And thus, in solidarity...
When the Leader of the Opposition, his Deputy Leader of the Opposition spoke, members of this council spoke in silence, although fundamentally disagreed with what they say. The irony of Councillor Reynolds addressing this council and being shouted at and bullied by the front row there is shocking.
Can I say to you that I have said to Councillor Dugmore on 2 occasions, shut up. Now, you know my ruling on this. If he does it again, he'll be through that door faster than his little legs can take him. And that goes for anyone. When someone's on their feet here, they are speaking as a councillor to the council. And you will please shut up and listen to what is being said. You might not like it. Don't answer me back. But that's the way things are. Now, Councillor Dugmore, don't try it again, or you will be going home early.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If anything, that absolutely demonstrates why this motion is so important. Absolutely demonstrates it. So, in solidarity with victims of domestic abuse, we stand against those who subject women to violence, humiliation, control and manipulation. How can it be that nearly 2 million people every year, the majority of them are women, suffer abuse at the hands of those closest to them? I commend the strength and bravery of those who are able to share their story and inspire others to come forward. Abusers are cowards, their tools are physical and physiological abuse, their aim is to silence and control their victim. I'd like to share with you the testimony of one person who refused to stay silent at the hand of her abuser. She says, "In the beginning it started with little things, like calling me names when I was going out. He would accuse me constantly of cheating and began checking my phone. After we split, it became worse. He would turn up uninvited at my house, saying he was there to see our child. If I refused to have sex with him, he would threaten to hurt me. He would constantly send threatening messages if I tried to ignore him. He would tell me where he would bury me if I moved on and met someone new, and that if I didn't want to be with him, I should leave the area for my own safety. He raped me on a number of occasions and spiked my drink. He would throw things, punch walls, and physically grab me if I tried to tell him to stop. He would take my money to buy alcohol and drugs. If I said no, he would be more abusive until I backed down. This left me struggling to pay bills and buy food for me and my child. It still feels very raw, and his absolute refusal to admit what he did has left me very angry. Although I still fear for my ex, I am so glad I left and went to court to fight for justice. It's a long process, but me and my son are moving forward with life, and I am able to see a future free from abuse." That is the story of just one victim in one town, but there are millions more like it. Some are yet to be heard, and we have the power in Telford Wrekin to give them a voice. We're a white ribbon town because there are women in our town today who feel isolated, lost, and no longer in control. Women today who are suffering at the hands of their partner need to know that organisations like ours can help them. There should be no safe place for abusers to hide. Victims of this terrible crime need to feel confident that they will be taken seriously and comforted with compassion. That is why I support this motion. Families and children cannot continue to suffer. There must be hope that one day they can look beyond the walls of their home, the confines of their abuser's control, and stand tall. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, we've got an amendment. Oh, yeah. Well, members, time to vote. Can I thank those who have contributed, because whether you agree with it or not, you have turned round. Are you moving a recorded vote, Angela? The recorded vote is carried.
Councillor Ashford. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bentley. Councillor Blundell. Councillor Boylan. Councillor Burford. Councillor Burrell. Councillor Eric Carter. Councillor Lee Carter. Councillor Cook. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dugmore. Councillor Reid. Councillor Arnold England. Councillor Nathan England. Councillor Evans. Councillor Francis. Councillor Furnival. Councillor Greenaway. Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Jones. Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Lowry. Councillor Mason. Councillor McClements. Councillor Mehta. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Overton. Councillor Pinter. Councillor Gilly Reynolds. Councillor Shirley Reynolds. Councillor Steve Reynolds. Councillor Rhodes. Councillor Sahota. Councillor Scott. Councillor Seymour. Councillor Sloan. Councillor Charles Smith. Councillor Malcolm Smith. Councillor Tillotson. Councillor Karen Tomlinson. Councillor Bill Tomlinson. Councillor Turley. Councillor Watling. Councillor Wright.
Unanimous. The vote was unanimous, 4 members. All right, members. Can I call on Councillor Nelson to propose his motion?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Only part of this motion is about Telford Wrekin Council. That's the part that concerns the Holly project. Part is about our residents and all affected by CSE. I hope that this becomes clear. It is my understanding that the Holly project's work is filling a particular need in a deeply sensitive and relevant way. It is right that the Council have funded this work. The Council has a duty to spend money wisely. In time, the Holly project should be and will be funded independently. Meantime, I ask the Council respectfully to consider extending the funding, not indefinitely, but for the life of the inquiry. We know to the best of our knowledge that this will now extend into next year, possibly to the end of next year. In fact, until the vital work of the inquiry is done. The need for the unique and caring support the Holly project is offering will remain and perhaps, as the truth emerges, increase. I cannot demand this funding extension. It just seems the right thing to do. I hope members believe, as I do, that it is one among many very tangible symbols of how seriously this council takes CSE in the borough and how much this council feels the pain of those who have suffered and are suffering. I am convinced that this council are moving as fast as they can to establish a truly independent and powerful inquiry into historical and current CSE in Telford Wrekin. A victim and survivor representative has themselves publicly endorsed the primacy of the right inquiry over a quick inquiry. Trying to do the right thing is better than trying to do a poor thing fast. It is a complex subject. The process the Council has followed has now involved the victim and survivors representatives at the heart of the process and with a key oversight role. This was not planned for. I am personally to blame, if blame is the right word. I asked for representatives of victims and survivors to join the process leading to an inquiry. We now take it all for granted that we have a Victims and Survivors Committee, and it is marvellous that brave people have stepped up to a very public role. As I've said, the vote to request an immediate local and independent inquiry was taken in April this year. Since then, the Council have been explicit in the information they have provided to date. This informs the public that the commissioning body will be or should be in place by November this year. We expect them to be rapid but thorough in finding the right candidate, not just any candidate available, to chair the inquiry. The best person will be in demand. They're unlikely to be off the shelf. So, as I said earlier, is our best guess an inquiry starting in the new year, early we hope, but still next year. Members, our role here is representative. Our job is to lead the views of our residents and also sometimes to reflect the views of residents. CSE in Telford remains front page news, Sky News. We intend the inquiry to bring catharsis and healing to past victims through the identification of past injustices. We are determined the inquiry will bring a new and independent focus to the current authorities. It will support their work to eradicate this vile crime. Every day that passes, unavoidably passes, before the inquiry starts, is a day too long. The wider public will be frustrated. You will be frustrated. It has proved inescapable that an immediate inquiry will take nearly a year to establish. The motion seeks no more than to voice, on behalf of everyone, that sense of frustration. We in this chamber stand with Telford and Wrekin in their difficult task. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Bentley, I understand you are going to second this motion.
Yeah, I reserve my right to speak.
Give you a chance to think about it. I'm talking to myself, not you. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the tone in which Councillor Nelson just presented that. However, the motion is as it's written down, and I can only respond to what's on paper and what it potentially would commit this council to. I think what I'm about to say now, I hope people listen. I think what we saw with the young parliamentarians before, it was so powerful. A lot to reflect on from the fact that someone can come outside of this chamber and talk more sense than we do a lot of the times. That was quite profound. But it's because we put our rosettes to one side, our soapboxes away, and we listened. And I hope what I'm about to say people will listen to and reflect on. I've got a statement here prepared by the Survivors Committee, who have been instrumental in the process thus far. It reads as follows. We, the Survivors Committee, are in contact with around 15 local survivors and their families in relation to the inquiry. They have unanimously agreed that getting the inquiry right is far more important than rushing through the process. Some people have waited 40 plus years for answers and feel that waiting a few additional months to make sure the inquiry is carried out without error is a correct way to do things. The slowing down of the process to ensure that the inquiry is carried out properly is a direct result of the survivors' input. The Holly Project is not part of the inquiry and is a separate entity. The Holly Project is there to offer and provide support to anyone that needs it, whether they are involved with the inquiry or not. The Holly Project aims to secure long-term funding that continues beyond the inquiry. They are grateful for all the help and support received from various parties in getting this project up and running, and are pleased that they are being listened to. I hope we've all listened to those words. And given the tone and the content of Councillor Nelson's speech, which seemed to mitigate the motion that's in front of us, I would ask him to withdraw his motion. I'd give him that opportunity now, a couple of seconds if he wants to. No. And that's disappointing for me, to be quite frank, that you don't want to withdraw the motion. Because it's a shame that since I took over this role as Cabinet Member to oversee the inquiry, there's not a day that goes by where you don't feel sorry for the pain that the survivors have been through. And I'm sorry now, and I'm more angry now, actually, that there appear to be councillors in this chamber who seem determined to put political expediency above decency, above principle, and above doing what is right. And I ask you again, listen to the words in that statement, but also the words of the survivor who recently and publicly stated on social media, politics has no place when it comes to the rape and sexual abuse of children. It is not a game. And voting for this motion, I think everyone needs to understand what voting for this motion actually means and what it does if you distill it down. It means that we as councillors put a higher price on politics than we do on doing the right thing. It means that we disagree with the Survivors Committee and the survivors they represent and the words they asked me to read out. It means that we are going back on that profound commitment that we made back in April and we've worked on every day since, that we will, with calm and level-headed leadership, deliver a truly independent inquiry by survivors for survivors. I'm sorry, but I am not prepared to vote for doing any of those things, and therefore I will not vote for this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley. You've reserved your right to speak and you are fast losing it. Nicola?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague Councillor Nelson aired, we proposed this motion through genuine concern. We proposed it in a very calm, collective way, though I am disappointed from the comments that have been heard across the floor this evening. Mr. Speaker, at the AGM held this year, we stood united. We stood together, as this council agreed to hold an independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation. The revelations that were uncovered, thanks to the bravery of survivors and a determined investigative reporter, sent shockwaves not just through our community, but on a national level. It was one of this council's finest hours as we stood, finally, together against child sexual exploitation with survivors. As the inquiry gets underway, survivors will have an opportunity to give their evidence to inform the inquiry. Some will have spoken of their experience before, some may be coming forward for the first time, and some may not feel they are ready to speak out. This is why the work of the Holly Project is crucial, as they provide free, survivor-led support for survivors of child sexual exploitation and an independent drop-in service that is run by survivors of CSE. It offers a safe place for individuals and their families to get the support and advice from people who understand. This peer-to-peer support is the first of its kind in the borough and could act as a blueprint for other parts of the UK to ensure survivors receive the support they need. Given the importance of the Holly Project and its plans to expand its services, it is vital that this project obtains long-term funding to ensure the project's future is secure. I greatly welcome the Council's decision to extend the pilot funding until March 2019. However, this does not go far enough and is the main thrust of why we have put this motion forward today, as it doesn't provide the ongoing support that is so crucially needed. Equally, whilst I welcome this Council's investment of £200,000 of additional funding for survivors and victims for the next 2 years, there is no guarantee that this funding will be secured specifically for the Holly Project, as it will be part of a tender process which is yet to begin, where there will be an opportunity to bid for the Commission of Support Services for survivors. Considering this, as far as we understand, Mr. Speaker, sadly the Holly Project does not have the security of committed funding beyond 2019, a fact that was not made clear in the press coverage released recently the other day, and it has caused uncertainty among many. Therefore, we call on all members within this chamber to come together once more and back this motion, as the security of long-term funding will genuinely secure the future of the Holly Project beyond March 2019 and ensure our survivors and their families have the support they need and the opportunity to rebuild their lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Bill Tomlinson.
Speaker, I can say I wholeheartedly agree with what Councillor Nelson proposed in what he spoke, but that's completely at odds with what we have written in front of us. He is now agreeing that it is slower in terms of the speed at which the operation is going, but it's a welcome slowdown to allow people's views to be taken into account. So I find that very hard if I'm going to vote for this motion, because it doesn't say that in the opening paragraph. His concerns, and expressed by Councillor Lowry as well, about the Holly project, I believe have been answered by this council tonight, and to make out that it's not being answered properly, it seems an injustice to what has been said. So it makes it extremely difficult for a person who's looking upon this and trying to wholeheartedly support this with victims in mind to actually agree to this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, quite frankly, I'm just a little bit confused, like Councillor Tomlinson is, with the wording of the motion put before us tonight. So I know Councillor Carter has asked them to withdraw, and I'd like you, with the wording of this motion, what you are saying just absolutely does not make sense. So I'm asking you if you will formally withdraw the motion, and let us all work together on this. You know, Councillor Lowry mentioned that. You know, would you formally withdraw the motion? I'm asking, before I go on further.
You say you're not concerned that there's a delay? You're not concerned? You are saying that? You're not concerned there's been a delay? You have no concern there's been a delay? Really?
Right, okay, I'm getting even more confused now. Right, you're obviously not going to withdraw the motion. As regards to the funding, you know, side of it, firstly, I'm delighted that the Holly project has been extended. Those talks were actually ongoing, and I know that, you know, before this motion came to Council. And I have to say the Holly project, like Councillor Lowry said, are doing an absolute amazing job. Amazing job. But as far as I'm alive and ticking, and Councillor Lee Carter, I'm sure, will say that that funding will be provided further. I am sure we will find something. So, you know, to say that it won't, you know, and I think that everyone would agree that it is about the victims and survivors. It has to be about the victims and survivors. It's about what they think is right, how they want the inquiry to go, and as I've confirmed in their statement, which Councillor Lee Carter mentioned, getting the inquiry right is far more important than rushing through the process. So that's why I'm concerned about that first para of your motion, because they are saying getting the inquiry right is far more important than rushing through the process. And it's important that they are listened to, not you. We will ensure that we do that. We want this inquiry to be independent and as transparent as possible. And actually, I welcome the meeting next week that Councillor Carter has called with the Telford MP. That's a real positive step, you know, to have that meeting. It's important that we all work together. The process, and everyone does understand the process, you know, and let's take the politics out of it. That it can only be advantageous to every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Angela, can I have Councillor Andrew Eade? Yes. I'm sure.
Thank you, Speaker. I hadn't intended speaking on this motion and very much wanted to see on Council coming together to deal with the inquiry we all agreed to some 5 months ago. And I have to say the response here tonight has been disappointing. I freely acknowledge that Conservative members have slowed down the process by insisting that survivors must take part in all stages of setting up the inquiry. I believe that it was the right and proper thing for them to do, and as it was flagged up by us as being essential before the current process had begun, any such subsequent delays, in all honesty, could have been prevented and avoided if our advice at that time had been taken on board. If we are to move on instigating an inquiry as quickly as first mooted by the current administration, and we should, then a change in approach is needed. Consequently, we are right to be genuinely concerned and express our concern at the lack of progress, whatever that reason may be. We're an opposition group here. We raised the issue of the inquiry, and we naturally want to see that progressing. And it's equally as right as well for Telford's concerned Member of Parliament, Lucy Allen, to also call for more progress to be made. We must remember any delay in progressing this inquiry is another day that a child may or will be abused. Perhaps with this in mind, you can understand the great concern that we've expressed in our motion. However, at this time, we're not here apportioning blame. We're not here for any other reason than to offer our services to help forge greater progress in getting the inquiry set up and underway. I hope that you will accept this offer for what it is, but progress must be made quickly if we are to retain our confidence in the current process. In addition, we are also keen to establish secure and continuing funding for the Holly project and welcome the belated and timely extension of funding until March 2019. The project is proving invaluable for survivors and family of CSA and CSE. However, it is not enough. This authority must assure by all means at its disposal that this funding extends for the duration of the forthcoming inquiry, and ultimately that funding must be separate from Telford Wrekin Council to ensure complete independence. So there's a good deal of work to be done in that direction, but it's work that we must do as an authority. Remember, the clock's ticking, and I promise that we're here to help in every way possible. But that future confidence will depend on the progress that this council makes, bringing an inquiry into being as soon as it possibly can. Our concerns centre around children, vulnerable children in this borough, and we need to deal with that. And Lee, we need to do what we can to get the inquiry set up and underway. I understand the difficulties in doing that. They are legion, but we have to find a way of doing it. And as I keep saying, we're here to offer that sort of help and assistance.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Peter Scott.
Mr. Speaker, before I start, can I just declare I have an interest in this as chairman of the advisory body, and I think other members also should declare interest as being members of that advisory body, but that's obviously up to them to do it. I did have quite an eloquent speech ready, but I have heard, although I already knew, the words of Councillor Lee Carter, the words of Councillor Nelson also, who clearly understands the position we're in at the moment. I've got absolute faith in this process. I totally understand why it was slowed down. It was slowed down for a very good reason, and that slowing was due to the Survivors Committee coming forward earlier in this process. It will naturally speed up the next stage in the commissioning process simply because we don't have to put it where it would have been in the first place. So I think we should stop really looking at this process as if it's something wicked that we should be moving on rather quickly and realise it's something that's not been done before in Telford and Wrekin. People are working very hard before and behind the scenes to make this happen. And if we truly want to all work together, let's listen to what's being said and done and understand the actual process. I am completely and utterly disgusted, actually, with some of the comments we get on social media from individuals. I think that has to stop, purely because there are people in the country, up and down the UK, that take one part of the criticism and then they come out with some of the most vilest remarks against people who are trying to do really good work. We really must stop our social media commentary on this process because it helps absolutely no one. I too think that this motion as it's written down should have been withdrawn. If people actually keep up with what's happening, it would not have been meant to put there in the first place. In terms of funding on the Holly project, I agree that more money should be found. It has been found. I believe it will be found in the future. And if any member really wants to help the Holly project, do what I've done. Donate to it. You can do it quite easily. It's there for you to be done. Let's just stop falling out over child sex exploitation and really work together and not pretend we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Gillian Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll keep it short. I feel like I've entered the twilight zone tonight. We've got a statement from the survivors and victims saying we don't want the process sped up. We have the opposition asking me to listen to them and say, actually, we really do need to speed the process up. And just the irony of being asked to silence their voices through a statement cannot be lost tonight. Surely. It's insane what we're hearing tonight. So if we are being forced to vote on this motion tonight, which I find very surprising that we are going to be asked to vote on it, please consider that when you vote tonight. Are you asking to silence their voices? After everything they've been through, they are saying the process they are happy with, and you're saying, actually, you disagree. So think about that when you vote tonight.
Councillor Sean Davis.
Mr. Speaker, I wasn't planning to speak on this motion. I really just want to express my opinion in respect of the first sentence. So the first sentence of this motion is, which has been put forward by the opposition, is this council expresses deep concerns at the continuing slow progress with the commissioning of the independent inquiry. The statement that Councillor Carter has read out from the Survivors Committee, we, the Survivors Committee, are in contact with around 15 local survivors and their families in relation to the inquiry. They have unanimously agreed that getting the inquiry right is far more important than rushing through the process. In other words, speeding it up. Some people have waited 40 years for answers and feel that waiting a few additional months, to make sure the inquiry is carried out without error is the correct way of doing things. So the motion that you're asking members to vote on is expressing deep concern about something that I haven't got a deep concern about because of the statement by the Survivors Committee. I'm not deeply concerned at the pace of the commissioning of the independent body. The reason for that is because, and I read again, some people have waited 40 plus years for answers and feel that waiting a few additional months to make sure the inquiry is carried out without error is the correct way of doing things. That gives me confidence, not deep concern. Now, if we are serious as a council, and nobody has a monopoly in this chamber or in this town over concern and safety of children, I'm, like many people in this room, parents, grandparents, nieces, nephews who live in this town, who have been brought up in this town. No one has a monopoly over concerns for children in this town. We all share that. And that isn't party political point, that's a human point. Am I deeply concerned at the slow progress? No, I'm not, because of that statement. I don't know whether or not the author of the motion consulted with victims and survivors when the motion was tabled, but you have it here that they are not deeply concerned, and therefore neither am I.
Thank you, Sean. Well, that completes my list. Can I therefore ask the mover of the motion? Yes, Stephen.
I'm easily forgotten.
Well, you said it. You said it.
That has been disappointing debate. Maybe I missed the point of this motion because I didn't think it was about pace. I thought it was about momentum. Don't point to papers to me, Sean. Now or ever.
Steve. Just
What we're saying is,
just keep quiet
we want the
and
momentum
conduct
to
yourself
carry on.
in a right manner. No, that's the third time you'll be on the way through the door.
I do not read people pointing to pieces of
Sorry,
paper.
you're the one who bit. Don't argue with it.
As I was saying, this is about momentum. It's not about party politics. This process began, and it was at the behest of people on this side of the advisory committee, of which I am one. And one thing I will thank Mr. Councillor Carter for tonight is the information from the question from Councillor Pinter. Because as a member of the advisory committee, there was a lot there tonight I heard that I hadn't been aware of. So, I'm not accusing you. All I'm saying is I wasn't aware of it. So this motion is about the momentum. The motion is about supporting the Holly project and the funding. What we should be recognising is the work that they're doing, is the way they're, and the ability, where people can go to a place and speak with people who understand what they're going through. Surely it isn't that difficult that we can come together, forgetting the words, and say, yes, we are going to work together. We've done it once, why can't we do it a second time? Or are you afraid? Members, I urge you to vote for this motion.
Any further speakers?
Vote, please.
Just a moment. Councillor Nelson, you want to speak? He's always bloody slow getting up. I say, Nelson is always slow in getting up, and he'll never.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to attempt to sum up the debate that's taken place this evening, partly because, to be honest, I wasn't expecting to have to. I was expecting that we would proceed tonight in the spirit of the EGM, where we recognised a common enemy who are outside this chamber, who are preying on the young people of this borough, and that we need to stand together to resist that common enemy, who are outside this chamber. I'd also noticed that the previous two motions, though they possibly were designed to divide, it doesn't escape anyone's notice that the majority of 16 to 24-year-olds support the Labour Party, and that might have been associated with the 16 enfranchisement, but we nonetheless voted for it. And equally with regard to White Ribbon, that actually was written perhaps attacking one individual, okay? But nonetheless, we judged, with due note of our request for amendment, we voted for it. However, this evening, when we come to this motion, actually the leader of the administration has been the most honest, because he's on record as saying he is not concerned. When the inquiry does sit, it will have a starting point, which I trust will be back far enough in time to provide the recourse that victims and survivors of historical abuse have endured. But it'll have an ending point, which will be the word current. And current means now. Current means what's happening in Telford right now. Because our issue is historical, and it is essential that the inquiry takes place in the right way, that it provides the recourse that the existing current survivors and victims require. But it's also designed, and the motion says, to address current CSC, which means that it's CSC that is taking place now. And I trust, and I take it on trust, I have no better information, that the inquiry and the actions of an independent chair will improve matters in Telford and will reduce CSC in Telford. So from that point of view, the sooner it starts, the better, and therefore we, on behalf of everyone outside this chamber, not just inside this chamber, must show concern that it's taking longer than we expected, which is what the motion is saying. Deep concern at the slow progress does not mean we don't understand why it's been slow, which we do. You can shake your head all you like, Sean, it doesn't make any difference. The second part is, in terms of the funding for the Holly project, we've had fine words and promises. I don't know that actually a bid that's been submitted has been passed. I don't know that. What we're asking the council to do is to follow our motion where we're saying, put your money where your mouth is, and for the duration of the inquiry. Thank you.
Are there any further speakers? No. Then we're going to move to the vote. A recorded vote. Relevant number of members? Yes. Right, Debbie?
Councillor Ashford. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bentley. Councillor Blundell. Councillor Boylan. Councillor Burford. Councillor Burrell. Councillor Eric Carter. Councillor Lee Carter. Councillor Cook. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dugmore. Councillor Eade. Councillor Arnold England. Councillor Nathan England. Councillor Evans. Councillor Francis. Councillor Fernall. Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Jones. Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Lowry. Councillor Mason. Councillor McClements.
Based on the wording of this motion and having listened to the client's statement, I cannot support this motion, so I'm against, and I would like that recorded.
Councillor Mehta.
Against.
Councillor Murray. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Overton. Councillor Pinter. Councillor Gilly Reynolds.
I'm going to listen to the voice of the survivors and victims, and I'm voting against.
Councillor Shirley Reynolds.
Very similar. The voices of the survivors and victims is the most important, and their words tell me to vote against.
Councillor Steve Reynolds. Councillor Rhodes. Councillor Sahota. Councillor Scott.
Based on the wording of the motion, against.
Councillor Seymour. Councillor Sloan.
Against.
Councillor Charles Smith. Councillor Malcolm Smith.
Against.
Councillor Tillotson. Councillor Karen Tomlinson. Councillor Bill Tomlinson. Councillor Turley. Councillor Watling. Councillor Wright.
Motion's lost. The motion is lost, ladies and gentlemen.
That's the end. Thank you very much.
And that completes your agenda, ladies and gentlemen, fellow members. I declare the meeting closed.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you.